Hey there, folks, and welcome. I'm Josh with the Orange County Library. I wanted to welcome you on our event today. Today we're going to be doing Farm to Cup Coffee, how the bean becomes the beverage. We're going to be doing this with Jarrett Johnson and Jacob from Lineage Coffee. They are a fantastic local roaster. All the beans are sourced from around the world and roasted here and presented here at their two different storefronts. The one off of Mills Avenue within East End Market. They're fantastic local brewers, and everyone knows right now it's the best time to support local. Sorry, my dog's freaking out a little bit here, but I'd like to welcome you all to one of our adult summer reading events. We have presented a lot of cool events this summer and are continuing to present more. You can check all those out here at ocls.info/ASR. It's a great place to see what we've been doing throughout the summer, so definitely take a check out at that. We'll be posting a link in the comments here. But yeah, without any further ado, let me bring in Jarrett and Jacob. Here we are. Jarrett, Jacob, how you doing today?
Good, Josh. Thanks for having us.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we love having you guys. How you been?
Been very good. Yeah, it's been obviously a weird time to be in the retail business, but I think it's been really cool to see communities band together and work together to keep things open and staying in business.
Yeah, adapt to the changes. Keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, absolutely. I see you guys have been doing a lot with delivery and some cool stuff. So if people aren't comfortable actually going into the roastery, but of course, as a coffee shop, you guys are always open to be able to come in, grab it, and go. Still doing everything just like we were before, right?
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
As much as we can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a little bit of limited seating, but yeah, we are. Yep.
Very cool. Yeah. It's definitely check out their here. I'm going to share up their website here. They've got a lot of really great stuff going on. So check out their website. You can order pounds of coffee at a time or by weight. You can see what they've been up to, what they've been roasting recently. So definitely take a check out on that. Here, I don't know why it didn't post, but there we go. All right, cool. Yeah, but I'll kind of leave it up to you guys. If anyone has any questions, please post those in the comments. We'll see all those, and when Jarrett and Jacob are ready, we'll bring them up and let you guys know about your questions. So yeah, thanks guys, and I'll let you take it away.
Awesome, thanks, Josh. Yeah, so
yeah, of course.
Let's go ahead and pull up the.
Yeah, I'll get
cool.
This presentation started.
Cool. I believe you guys can all see that now. It's a little weird because normally you can get some kind of feedback from the audience, but this is a little bit different.
We'll just talk to ourselves.
You'll just kind of talk to ourselves. So anyways, yeah, so we wanted to do kind of a little bit more of an interactive style, teaching a little bit about coffee and not really focusing at all on Lineage specifically. This is just a kind of a talk about coffee. And we can get as in-depth on the questions as you'd like to go. But we're going to kind of skim over the surface of it. And then at the end, you and I can talk a little bit back and forth about some of the roasting process and stuff like that. So I think Josh introduces there at the beginning, but I focus more on the green coffee buying side right now. And Jacob focuses more on the dialing in the coffees, on the roasting for production roasting, how exactly we're going to roast them once they get here. We work together a lot on really the purchasing now, but anyways, yeah, so that's a little bit about us. So first we're going to talk about, where coffee comes from and how it's processed. So making the coffee, I'm going to run through these slides really quick. And since my wife put together the slideshow, there's going to be pictures of me. I'm sorry.
I'm not anything.
I don't know. Maybe the back of your head got caught in some of the photos or something. But
Sure.
Anyway, so coffee is a seed of a coffee cherry. You can see there in the photo that basically two beans will be face to face inside of a coffee cherry. Coffee cherries kind of have a thick skin. It's a little bit like of a thicker, husky kind of skin on the coffee cherry. And then there's like pulp, like in a regular cherry or grape. It's kind of sticky fruit pectin. And then there's two beans face to face inside of there. They grow primarily between 20 degrees north and 20 degrees south. It's a little bit closer to 25 degrees, but basically that is the coffee growing belt. And what that means is coffee can grow there because the nights aren't freezing. Here in North America, we're too far north of the equator. And so our nights here, like we can't grow coffee in Colorado or California where there's mountains because it just gets too cold and it freezes. We do want cool nights and warmer days to produce great coffee.
But, I mean, you can grow coffee.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's some people here in Orlando who have brought me in coffee cherries.
Yeah, like I wanna own a coffee tree.
You should.
But yeah, it's just really hard to grow stellar coffees that's not in that belt.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, unless you have like an oxygen deprivation chamber, I guess.
Yeah, which I think is a thing.
Yeah, you should build one of those first.
Sure.
And then do
Let's
it.
take a loan from the business.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, like I said, you want cool nights. You don't want coffee fully in the sun because basically that shade will help to restrict the amount of sunlight. And so that's why you always hear shade grown. Basically because the sun will leach a lot of the minerals and nutrition from the tree and from the leaves. And it also really damages the actual soil. So a lot of the coffee farms that we visit, they don't rake up the leaves and the foliage that collects around the base of the trees, just so that can help to like provide this protective layer over the soil.
Would that be to like help keep the soil moist as well?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it holds in more moisture and it doesn't just evaporate right off. Yeah, yeah. So in a lot of countries, coffee is grown on steep slopes, really everywhere except for Brazil, right?
Yeah.
And so it's grown on these really steep slopes, and I mean it's really hard to even walk on those slopes. So you definitely aren't like driving a truck on there to harvest the coffee. In Brazil, coffee is grown on these high plains, so they can actually harvest it with like basically a truck that will drive between the rows, and it shakes the trees, and the coffee cherries fall down into a truck, and then it spits them into another hopper. This picture is just of a drying bed. You can see there behind the rake, there's these kind of raised little lines of green coffee that has been processed already. But we talked a little bit about where coffee grows. So look at the next step is after it grows, it's harvested. And then after it's harvested, it's processed. Now, this is something we can't really take credit for doing as Lineage or any roaster in the country, because the processing, whether it's wet or dry, is happening at the producing country. So wet processing is one of the biggest styles of coffee processing. It's done in about 80% of the globe. Would be doing wet processing. It's where the coffee cherry is pulled from the tree. They will immediately run it through basically an auger like this. And that is, it's got like almost this drill bit rotating in the center there. And it slices open the coffee cherry and spits the beans out in a different direction. And here we see kind of the waste, which is those coffee cherry skins, which a lot of times they'll be fermented, turned into worm food, and then really good compost.
This is also referred to as cascara.
Yeah,
right?
That's a great point. Yeah, cascara tea. Do you drink it at all?
No, I haven't had the tea, but I've had this like sparkling, like
Oh
beverage
yeah,
or whatever. That's like becoming a thing. So we might be seeing more like cascara products, I'm sure, within the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Especially since we're trying to like limit like much more waste,
right?
As well, and trying to use like the coffee cherry as a whole for more of those kind of products.
And it is such a big, like, there's so much waste there. There's so much coffee cherry juice in the skins. I saw at a place in Colombia that they were doing, they were using the coffee cherry juice to produce like a sweetener. They were trying to concentrate it and use it for sweetener. Almost kind of cool, almost like a honey type of product. So Jacob, what are your thoughts on wet processed coffees as you're tasting cupping?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, there's like exceptions to every rule, but I think in general, wash processed coffees tend to be more transparent, more clean, usually like higher acidity compared to like others. Not to say that other coffees won't have a good amount of acidity, but I like to use terms as like crisp, fruity, sparkling, even. Especially with like washed Ethiopian coffees tend to have a lot of like florals with it as well. In comparison to what we'll talk about next, which is dry processing coffee.
Yeah, now I wanted to ask you too, because you said a lot of the really great characteristics we see out of wet processed coffees. What do you think are some of the poor characteristics? Like if it's a bad washed coffee, what would it taste like? What could maybe people look for?
I think it has some like bitter characteristics. There's just some like dryness to it. Just flat even as well. I think with any kind of like processing, you can really bring out some like stellar characteristics, but like I think it can be fickle in some areas of the process to where you could just either ferment it too long, or I'm drawing a blank, but like there's plenty of like aspects of it that can make it basically take those flavors away.
Yeah, I think too. Poor quality washed coffee tends to be really just dry and woody, whereas I think a poor dry processed coffee is like fruity and vinegary because it's actually
like over fermented.
Yeah. So Jacob, tell us a little bit about dry processing. Oh, hold on. There we go. Tell us a little bit about dry processing.
Yeah, so dry processing is similar to wash processing, only in the fact that once the coffee cherries are picked from the tree, they're dried inside the cherry for 30 to 60 days. And then from there, after it gets down to moisture content, like 13, 12% moisture content, from there, it's depulped in like that depulper that we saw like from like the wash process as well. And then like
bag to bag and shit. Exactly.
And like the reason why it's like it makes it so differently is because like that coffee cherry is like fermenting inside, or the seed is fermenting inside that coffee cherry. So that's why a lot of like dry processed coffees tend to be much more like fruity, juicy, because it's like really absorbing some of those juices that it's like sitting in essentially. But like we were saying, I think negative aspect of that is that it will taste more fermenty. And I was saying that wash processed coffees tend to be more transparent and clean. That's because with dry processed coffees, you have this like overwhelming like sense of sweetness and fruitiness, but it also like counterbalances with some of these like off flavors of like fermentiness. So it's kind of like a trade-off to where you can get like a really stellar dry processed coffee that has like minimal negative flavors to it and like maximum like sweetness. But sometimes it's kind of hard to find like a stellar dry processed coffee, in my opinion.
No, I agree.
You know what I mean?
I fully agree. This year out of Ethiopia, we've been loving some of the coffees.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening this year, but it's like, it's great.
Kenya has been weird. Everything was, because of rains, was pushed back like 2 weeks. Anyways, so that's a little bit about wet and dry processing. Dry processing is less common. You do see it in some places. Yemen is a place where everything's dry processed. Brazil, everything's, for the most part, pulp natural, which is like in between fully wet and fully dry. It's kind of a step between. Sumatra does their semi-washed, which is, again, kind of slightly different than pulp natural. But all coffee has to be processed. And that's just simply, when you hear coffee processing, you think that's a way of getting the bean out of the cherry and dried and prepared for shipment. I think I'm skipping past some. Coffee is a very vulnerable crop. It's really tough. It's very dependent on weather. And then there's like leaf rust, coffee berry borer. These are things that are really common to see. And actually, so leaf rust used to not really exist above 1,400 meters. But because of like global warming, you're actually seeing leaf rust move up a little bit. And now it survives up to like 1,600 meters, which is kind of interesting, you know.
What was the reason for why leaf rust occurs?
Well, a lot of times it blows into the farm, so it'll be carried from a neighboring farm, and then it will basically infect everything right there. Yeah, and it that's what the picture is. Obviously, here on the left, it looks like rust on a leaf, but it'll fully eat away at the tree, and a lot of times farmers will have to do an early harvest
to save the cherries.
Yeah, exactly. Rwanda is very famous for a beetle. Kind of in the image here on the right, you can see the coffee berry borer. Rwanda has a particular defect called the potato defect. Jacob has a lot of experience with this. I think one of the first coffees we cupped together had a potato defect.
I think so. That was like a couple years ago. We got, haven't we? I think we've cupped a couple potato defects.
Yeah, for sure.
Like in the early days, and I think a couple of years ago we had this Rwandan coffee. And I just remember, like, we were getting a cupping ready, and you were, like, sitting, like, across the room, and I started grinding some coffees. And then all of a sudden, I just see, like, your face just, like, light up and be like, what the freak was that? And, like, we're all smelling this, like, just, like, rotten, like, tomato-y or potato-y. Yeah, it was
bad.
It was insane.
Yeah, it was. And so the interesting thing about the potato defect is, unlike this picture of the coffee bean that looks like moldy and stuff, potato defect is completely
undetectable until you roast it and grind it. And it's usually just like even a single coffee cherry or coffee seed will have that, and it'll just like ruin your whole cup.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally a deal. And it's so dry. Oh, it's awful. Yeah. So how to purchase coffee. This is like a thing that Jacob and I talk a lot about. You know, here at the Roastery, we're kind of always cupping coffee. We cupped coffee earlier today and yesterday and the day before. We're cupping Kenya arrivals right now. We're cupping Ethiopia arrival samples. So purchasing coffee is done a few different ways. When we first started, we would just go down a pick list from an importer. And we would just say, oh, yeah, we want 5 bags of this coffee that you have in your warehouse. We want 10 bags of that or whatever.
It's kind of like online shopping.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like shopping on Amazon. You just go and grab whatever you want, throw it in your cart, and it's that simple. And over the years, we've gotten a lot more involved in the way that we purchase coffee. So the way that we do it now for the majority of our coffees is we go to the countries during harvest, and then we'll cup a bunch of different coffees. A lot of times it's, you know, over 200 coffees from a single area. We have particular areas that we really like. I think of like Palestina and Colombia and different places around the world that we really know we like the profile of that region. The terroir produces a coffee that we really like and the flavor characteristics. So anyways, we will go to those places at harvest, taste through hundreds of coffees, write a contract for what we want to buy, and then we'll get a sample sent to us here where we get to roast that here at our roastery and cup a sample again to kind of check ourselves. Because sometimes, you know, when the breeze is blowing in Colombia and you're getting delicious coffee served on beautiful mountaintops, it can play with your mind a little bit and you want to buy everything.
Right. Well, plus, like, anything can happen from the moment you taste the coffee, like in Colombia, to when it gets to America. Because, like, you know, you'll taste the coffee and it'll take, up to half a year to, like, get here.
Yeah.
You know? So, like, anything could happen with shipping or, you know, being left out in the sun.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, Sumatra is because they have such high humidity there, because it's an island nation, it's part of Indonesia, but because it's an island, they'll get such high humidity, especially during monsoon season, that they'll actually have to re-dry coffees at their port before they ship them out.
Yeah.
I've heard that. Anyways, so the way in which coffee can be purchased can be as easy as clicking on, you know, an importer's website, or it can be as involved as going to the country, meeting the producer, and cupping through all the consecutive weeks of their harvest. And that's kind of the way we like to do it now, whenever possible. Most all of our coffees are through are through a relationship. I'm trying to think of
whether that be like directly with a farmer or with an importer.
Yeah, exactly. Like right now, our Kenya coffees, we went to Kenya, we wrote the contracts, but then you actually will pay an importer to import those coffees for you.
Right.
So anyways, coffee buying is a lot of fun. And, I think that it is like a lot of times looked at as like, oh man, that's why I want to get into coffee, is because I want to go travel the world and buy coffees. But in all actuality, it's a very small part. And it actually can be quite boring and tedious, is like cupping through hundreds and hundreds of coffees.
Yeah, and a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
As well, because you're deciding what's going to be on your menu for, like, we will usually buy a minimum of 10 bags if it's just like a one-off coffee would be like a minimum of 10 bags usually, and that's well over like a couple thousand pounds.
Yeah.
Especially with like espresso blends or espresso roasts that we use in bulk at like our cafes and stuff. We'll buy upwards to 100 bags of that kind of coffee as well.
Yeah. So it is a big commitment. And it is. There are a lot of hurdles of working with a direct farmer. We work with a guy named Javier in Guatemala, and the last container they sent us, there was a little tiny hang up in that the coffee was floor loaded by their warehouse in Guatemala. So it got here, and the first thing we had to do was palletize. I think we had 240 bags come in, and they needed to be palletized first. It was kind of crazy, but one of the things we've always strived to do is to really be involved and to have it be not just I think in every sense to be a true relationship coffee, to be a kind of like we're friends and texting the farmers,
Oh yeah, because like they're as much part of our business as we are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and especially because a lot of times we'll write these contracts on coffees for the next year. So we have to kind of make sure that the quality is where we need it to be to serve the coffee.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of funny, we're sitting right in front of that roaster that's in the picture. And that's a roaster called a Joper. And I guess here we're just talking a little bit about roasting. So Jacob, talk to us a little bit about, I know a question I get asked a lot, but maybe you'd be better at answering this, is how do we decide what's going to be roasted light, what's going to be roasted dark, what's going to be roasted short or long? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways I look at it. One is just, first of all, how is the coffee tasting? Usually we'll cup the coffee before we actually start production roasting it. We have like a little small sample roaster, and we'll either roast a sample of that's been sent to us. So we usually will have a pretty good idea what the coffee will taste like before we even start like actually dialing in on the production roaster. So that in itself has a lot of information as to like just how we would go about roasting of that particular coffee. But I think the other aspect is just through like experience with like roasting, coffees that will be similar, whether in like similar region, country, the density of the coffee, the size of the bean, and stuff like that. And so I think, because I get asked that a lot as well, and like honestly, it's pretty difficult to hit the first roast like perfectly, just because there's always exceptions to every rule in coffee, from what I've learned so far, and you can know everything you need to know about a certain coffee, and you can just like destroy it on the first roast, like in a bad way. And I always tell people that you kind of have to like work backwards. So like you once you roast a coffee, you just cup it like for a week straight, every day, to just kind of like get a feel for it and like how to change it. Because like by smelling or like looking at the color of the roast, not only tells you how the coffee is roasting that particular time, but once you cup it, that's when you can actually start dialing in like exactly what tweaks you want to do, whether that be like, this conversation, we could talk about this for hours and hours. But like just like a small example would be like if we know from previous cuppings that a coffee is a really sweet coffee, and we roast it for the first time on the production roaster, and we're cupping it again, and it's just tasting like a little like sour or like a little too like acidic or whatever, then that's kind of a first indication for me to like, okay, I need to increase the sweetness, so I'm gonna extend the roast just like a little bit longer, just to give all those, and not to get like extremely into like a lot of detail, but like the chemical reactions in the roaster, give that a little bit more time to bring out some of those sweetness flavors, with like the Maillard reactions and the development time. You know, like it's just like so complex that there's just like so many like variables to it. But one thing I will say is that like with roasting, there's really only a couple things you have control over, which is your gas, so like how intense the flame is on the drum, and your airflow. And with those two controls, you control the time of the roast and how hot or how dark you roast it.
Yeah.
So like with those, it's only those 4 variables.
Yeah.
And with those, you can just like unlock a plethora of like flavors. The other thing I'll say, which is probably, I should have started with this, which is the most important thing in coffee roasting, this is what I learned very early in my career, is that in the roasting process, you don't put flavor into the bean. You can only take flavor out. Yeah. Right. I always thought that like roasting was like, oh, like when you taste like a really good coffee, it's like, ooh, that's a good roast. But there's really no such thing as like, there's such thing as a good roast, but it's really the roaster's job is to showcase the producer's work, essentially.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's why we take a lot of pride in having those relationships with our producers and even our importers as well. It's because we want to honor their hard work in that way.
I think that's a great point. Another thing I'll mention too is, this is just kind of very basic, but that roaster that you see in the picture there, or maybe you can see it behind us better, but it's just a drum that rotates on this horizontal axis. And what that drum does, it's kind of rifled on the inside to push the beans to the front of the drum. So as soon as you open the door, the beans fall out. And really our job is to, like Jacob said, control the time and the temperature. And what that means is unlike your oven at home, when you're putting something in a static temperature, we are not only monitoring the temperature of the drum, but the temperature of our beans. So in the center of the roaster, there's a temperature probe that goes into that bed of beans inside the drum. And what we're doing is we're looking at temperatures of the beans and how that rate of rise looks. And we make our adjustments based off that number. And so really it's this curve, like kind of a bell curve of the temperature. And it's kind of like a reverse bell curve.
Yeah, man. Like if you look at it on a graph and go like,
it starts. We charge the drum up here at, let's say, 400 degrees. It's going to drop down to 180 degrees, and it's going to slowly climb back up.
Yeah, and that's because you're dropping room temperature beans into a hot roaster, so the probe is trying to catch up to what the actual bean temperature is. That's why like you'll see the temperature drop, but it's really like just measuring how hot the beans are getting.
Yeah,
really.
Exactly. Yeah, and to kind of simplify those chemical breakdowns and reformations that Jake was talking about, I think about it as faster equals brighter, slower equals sweeter.
Right.
So that's in relationship to the time of the roast. Faster roast equals a brighter, more acidic coffee. And then slower roast will equal more sweet coffees, just because you almost picture like the flavor of an onion, and then when you saute that onion at a low temperature for a longer period of time, the longer the sauteing, the more the heat reaches the center, the breakdown of these complex chains in reform into simple sugars that we taste. So the hard part is, as a roaster, that the sweetness and acidity, which we want high of both, we want high sweetness, high acidity, but they peak at different times. So we have to try to kind of catch them both at the optimal level to bring the cup into balance.
Yeah, without over roasting, because you have your acidity and your sweetness, but then you also have your like, we'll call it bitterness or roastiness of the coffee, like creeping up. Like the longer or darker you roast it, you're playing with these two, but this guy's like creeping up as well.
That's a good point.
So that's something just to like be aware of. But we don't normally have a lot of problem with that, especially with I would say like higher quality coffees.
Yeah, they're very dense. They can take the roast without adding that bitterness. There's I used to get asked a lot of times when I was at the farmer's market working, people would say like coffee upsets my stomach. And I did some research and tried to find out like, why is this? And there's an acid that's produced in darker roast. It's an acid that's produced from actual carbonizing something, so burning it to where it becomes ash. And it's called quinic acid, and it's produced at darker roasting temperatures, and that's what upsets a lot of people's stomach. So coffee does have a lot of different acids in it, but most of them it has in common with other fruits and vegetables. Anyways, something to maybe think about next time you are drinking coffee, or you are feeling like maybe a dark roast is upsetting your stomach. Maybe try a lighter roast. This is on the screen is the last thing I'll point out is that a dark roast will a lot of times mask that terroir.
Yeah, for sure. Because like the darker you roast it, the more you get the flavors of the product of the roast, not necessarily the producers, what the producers put into the coffee, essentially.
Yeah. And I think with a lot of roasters like us, we would call ourselves like a third wave roaster, which basically means, that's kind of an old school term now, but it basically just means you put emphasis on the coffee growing region more so than the roast. Right? What to look for when buying coffee? Jacob, you tell us what you look for.
I don't buy coffee.
Just steal it. Just steal it right off the roaster. Roast date, make sure you check the roast date. It's better than a best buy date, because some roasters say 3 months, some roasters say 6 months.
Yeah, which is kind of dumb, because I've never had a coffee that's, so all coffee is drinkable after like 3 to 6 months. I don't even know like how long it takes for coffee to go bad. I actually don't know that.
I mean, just to get stale?
No, just like to be undrinkable, like to be unsafe to drink.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I think the moisture content is so low; it's only at 4%. That I think that it can't actually. I think that it can't. Yeah, I don't think it could mold at that level of moisture.
Like cereal.
Yeah, like it just gets really bad and dry. I don't know. Maybe that's a test.
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't really matter, because you shouldn't drink coffee.
Yeah, you shouldn't drink. Yeah, I would say ideal time is you want to drink a coffee between 2 days after roasting up to 3 weeks after roasting.
Yeah, and like maybe with a caveat of almost a month with some coffees, honestly. But I definitely would say like after a month off roast, more often than not, you'll start tasting some dryness and some just like bagginess.
Yeah, true. I got a picture the other day from a friend, and he said, "Hey, I was just at my mom's house and I scored this bag for you." It was a bag of Lineage coffee from 2015, and this was like 3 months ago. I was like, "Where was that?" He was like, "In the freezer." She was waiting to drink it, storing it in the freezer. What is your thought? Should I store my coffee in the freezer or on the countertop? What do you think?
So we just recently did kind of like another experiment with that, where we had same coffee, and we kept one at room temperature, one at like refrigerator temperature, and one at freezer temperature, and we kept all those blind after like 3 months, I think, or a couple months. And the freezer temperature coffee really held up very well. But I wouldn't recommend people to like always store their coffee in the freezer. My thought on it is like, if you want to keep, if you like a coffee really well, and you're like, I know this coffee won't be like on the menu for like forever, especially since like coffees come and go as like harvest happens. So if you want to like freeze a coffee to like save for like a special occasion, almost like a fine wine in a way, that's kind of like my thought on it. But like if you're going to do that, you got to make sure that the bag that you're keeping in, it's like really airtight, because you really don't want that air and kind of air to be in there because it'll crystallize. I think in the freezer, and that's not great for your coffee. So I'd say for like your everyday use, I don't think it's worth keeping it in the freezer.
Yeah.
But if you want to do like a long-term storage thing, then yeah, it does kind of preserve the coffee from oxidizing.
Yeah, as long as it's in a sealed bag, we measured and flushed the coffee bags. Maybe my friend's mom was holding on to this for a special occasion. I think to second what Jacob said, I don't think I would hold it in the freezer for more than 6 months or a year.
Be interesting. It'd be interesting.
I mean, we could take it. We could take it all the way. Yeah.
Maybe I'll put a bag in the freezer today
for 2026.
Yeah, because like it would be kind of a fun idea to be like, just like with wine or like anything, just like be like, hey, I have this bag from 2015. This is a stellar coffee.
I know my freezer would be full by now, though, because there's a lot of coffees we've had that I'm like, I never want to forget this coffee.
Yeah.
How to brew good coffee. Always weigh it. I don't want to spend too long on this because use filtered water.
Yeah, I mean, like the simple answer is, I guess, just brew it how you like it. But you're right. Having a scale would be much better for consistency, at least.
Yeah.
And you get a lot better idea of like, I don't know, you can have a lot of fun with it. Actually, my sister just got like, she just started getting like this whole coffee setup, and she was like asking me like all these things like to get, and she didn't even mention a scale, and so I just sent her a scale because I'm like, this is the first thing you need if you're gonna start brewing coffee at home. Like, it doesn't matter how you brew it in, even if you just put coffee in a cup and then pour water over it and then sip it like that. Like, you need a scale to like get more consistency with like every cup you brew. And you can like, that's the best way to like nerd out with it.
Yeah,
as
it
well.
is.
Like you can experiment with, we have like brewing recipes and stuff like that, and get real fun with it.
I know that like something that I used to hear my parents say, or I mean other people too, you'd hear them say like, oh man, I made a pot this morning and it was perfect. I don't know why, but it just tasted great this morning. I think that's normally caused by they actually finally got the right recipe that morning, but the next morning they have no idea what they did the day before. So with repeatability, that's a big thing. You want to have a scale. You're at your computer right now. This is a Hario scale in this picture here. Maybe jump on Amazon and add one of those to your cart.
It's probably the best scale for the money.
It is, yeah, $40. It lasts forever. I think a couple of AAA batteries. It's great, and it has a timer on there because time matters when you're brewing the coffee too. The other big investment that I think people should invest in for home brewing, grinder.
Grinder, for sure.
Yeah,
like you don't really want to skimp out on the grinder, and don't get a blade grinder.
Do not get a blade grinder.
Do not get a blade
You can
grinder.
get a grinder also on Amazon. Barazzas are good little grinders.
What's it? Barazza Encore.
Barazza Encore.
It's a good grinder. That one will run you like
100, 120 maybe. I mean, I always, when people see the price of that hand grinder Commandant, they're like $280 for a hand grinder. But it's just such a good investment. I absolutely love that grinder because what you're paying for is the actual, the burrs. So Barazza has their burrs. It's a conical burr. So kind of one burr is like this, and then the other one is like a collar around it. And you get a little less consistency with that than with the two flat burrs, like is in the Commandant hand grinder. There's some really, really good hand grinders. If you're really wanting to nerd out about coffee, maybe spend your money less on a motor, use your arm, but get a really good burr set through buying a hand grinder.
Yeah, that's true. Plus, there's a lot to it with heating the beans as well.
That's a good point.
I guess it's kind of a rabbit hole.
Yeah. I agree though. And I put it here in the comments here, but try to screw up coffee and see, like, taste it. Do it, maybe a good recipe is 16 grams of water to 1 gram of coffee. And maybe try one day what is 10 grams of water to 1 gram of coffee. Try to screw it up, then do 20 grams of water to 1 gram of coffee. I think that's one of the best ways you can really calibrate your palate. And it's important to note here that dark roast does not equal strong coffee, and light roast does not equal weak coffee. The strength is determined by the ratio of water to coffee, not the degree of roast.
And a caveat on that is darker roasts will tend to have a weaker body.
True.
In general, just because like you're essentially burning away the bean the darker you roast, and so there's less things for the water to extract.
Yeah, that's I think it's perfect. How we started, we don't need to put that up. So Josh, I'd love to know. I don't know if there's any questions, but we would love to kind of answer any questions we can. Sorry, Josh, I'm not sure if it's just us, but I can't quite hear you.
Yes, I had my mic muted. My bad. Hear me now?
Yep, right. Now you're good.
All right, so yes, I didn't see any questions yet in the comments, but if you guys have any questions, please post those down there. Any questions on your own setup, anything that you're trying to do from home. So I know that my dad here, he's watching the video right now, and he just started roasting from home. Yeah. So he started out with just because he had an air fryer around and he heard that you could do it in there. What do you guys recommend, like, starting out? What's a good kind of way to start roasting your own coffee, or seeing if it's something that you even want to do?
I hear a lot of people, if you don't want to like put a lot of money into it up front, I hear a lot of people using popcorn poppers to roast coffee, and I think you can actually get like relatively okay results with that. I mean, it's more of like the fun of doing it, really, and just kind of see if you want to like get into it. But if you actually want to get into like home roasting, you know, there's actual like roasters, like smaller roasters you can buy. I mean, like we have one here that's a sampler roaster, but essentially you can set that up in your garage. I think I've seen some other products of like that kind of look like a microwave with like a little thing, like a barrel inside that will like electronically heat the coffee as well. I don't know if you've seen those, but it looks like a microwave, and it essentially is the same concept.
Yeah, I think particularly like when you're roasting at home, just make sure that you're weighing your pre-roast weight and then recording your weight loss, because your weight loss is going to be a big, it's the biggest factor that you can it's the biggest element you can control by the duration of the roast. Typically we do on our production roaster, we'll do about 12.5% weight loss. And the way to find that is just take your pre-roast weight minus your post-roast weight divided by the pre-roast weight. And that will give you a percentage of weight loss. And that's a really helpful number, because presumably the darker the roast, the more weight loss. The lighter the roast, the less weight loss.
Cool. So that weight loss is coming mostly from what, the water, I guess, that you're losing, or just the actual integrity of the bean?
Yeah, part of it's water, because like all coffee has a water content to it, and in the roaster, that water essentially just evaporates out of the bean. But then once that happens during the roasting process, then like the bean itself, like the cellular structure starts breaking down, and it's like a log on a fire. The longer that log's on that fire, the more it'll just break down. And you'll lose weight that way as well.
Cool. So I had a couple of questions coming in about grinders. One, why is a blade grinder bad? And two, what exactly were those two grinders that you were suggesting, and maybe some like kind of price points for, like, okay, this is what I want to an entry level. This is what I want to. I've been doing this forever. So,
I think the thing about grinders is you want the grinder to grind the coffee as consistently as possible. So you want like all the little pieces to be like at the same size as you can. No grinder will do it like perfectly, but there are some really good grinders out there that will do it as close as possible. With blade grinders, it's essentially the same thing as like a food processor or a blender. It's just chopping up it's just chopping up the beans. But once the bean is like in contact with the blade, it's not like a burr grinder where it'll drop into and be done grinding. It'll just keep spinning in there, so you'll get a lot of like inconsistencies as far as like pieces like this big and then pieces like that big, and that'll create a lot of difficulties with extraction once you pour the hot water on the beans, because extraction happens with, and you can probably be like nerd out way more about this, but extraction basically you kind of take the surface area for a cup. I mean, you want to expand?
Yeah. Basically, just when you do a blade grinder, you push the button and you always get that like coffee dust that's stuck to the lid, and you pull it out and it's like, oh, I got coffee dust, but then I still have beans that are untouched by the blade in there, and that will produce a really unevenly extracted cup because of the different size there. So the reason a burr grinder is better is because coffee gets to a certain particle size, and then it's small enough to fit through the gap between the burrs, and then it's fed into a hopper. And so because of that reason, you get more consistency. The grinders we would recommend, there's actually a grinder I just bought for my parents off Amazon called Capresso, which was like $80. It was a really good low RPM burr grinder. You want a lower RPM, one, because they don't deafen your ears because they're so loud, and two, because those lower RPMs don't heat up so fast, so that it doesn't like basically recook the coffee, is the idea. So I really like Capresso is good, and then Baratza is the other one. And I really love hand grinders because you can buy a really good hand grinder and you're getting the same like quality in the burrs that we pay. I mean, we did a side-by-side of our EK43 grinder, which is notoriously
thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it's almost a $3,000 grinder at the shop. And we did a taste test between that and the $280 hand grinder from Commandant, and there was very little difference. And we actually tasted it beside a blade grinder, and it was very, very obvious where the blade grinder was. But the difference between the EK43, a $3,000 grinder, and this $280 Commandant was very minimal.
What kind of flavors? What's the flavor profile different between like the blade grinder? And, like,
that's a good point. Dry. So a blade grinder will produce a coffee that is either incredibly strong or incredibly weak, and oftentimes both at the same time, which is kind of weird and hard to explain. But it will give you a very dry finish. It will taste like chewing on wood chips, as opposed to drinking a juicy, fresh cup of like. When a coffee has an even grind size, you get a good even extraction on it. It's like you taste it, and it's kind of the difference between like when you take a sip of coffee and you're like, I'm gonna add some cream to that, or you take a sip of coffee and you're like, like, you know what I mean? Like I can't.
Refreshing.
Yeah, it's almost like you can't even explain it. Just the experience is just totally different.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Absolutely. And so we had someone who said they might have missed it, but what's the suggested brew equipment that you guys like? Like a mocha pot versus like a Chemex versus, an AeroPress, French press, whatever. What's the kind of difference between those two, and what do you guys like the most, I guess?
I mean, I'll tell you what I mainly use at home is a Hario V60 pour over, and that's what we use at the cafes as well. I think in general, I like to use pour overs in general at home, and most pour overs, in my opinion, are more similar than they are different. You really get into more differences with like filter paper used in them, but in my opinion, like with like pour over type stuff, you just get a little bit more transparency and like a cleaner cup with those kind of brewers compared to like a French press, to where like French press is, you get a little bit more heavier of a cup. It's like a higher extraction.
It's a full immersion extraction, so the same coffee is in contact with the same water the whole time. And it's not ideal for producing a really great cup of coffee, in my opinion.
Because you get a lot of lot more soluble material in that. So it's I don't know the last time you had a French press, but after you're like finished drinking a cup of French press, there's usually like some like coffee grounds like at the bottom of your cup. Like you won't get that with any kind of filter like pour over type brew equipment.
Yeah, I like Hario V60. Hario V60, and then Kalita Wave is another pour over set I really like. For a home brewer, I really like the Mocha Master. That's the one we sell. I really like it. It's a great,
automatic.
Yeah, for an automatic. That's an automatic brewer. It's not automatic in that you set it up to grind your coffee the night before, but it's an actual, you flip a switch and it turns on. And the reason I like that brewer is because they last forever. And then the other reason is because it's really easy to take apart and clean all of the inside parts, which is why I think it's very valuable.
Yeah, I think that comment mentioned a mocha pot as well. I have a mocha pot, and I really enjoy brewing coffee with a mocha pot, even though it doesn't produce like the greatest coffees. It's more of like an experience type thing. Also minimal waste as well, if that's like a concern for you, because you don't have like a paper filter to throw away every time. Good for travel if you have a heating element with it as well. And it's just like kind of fun. Like, I mean, my wife is Cuban, so we drink a lot of like Cuban style coffees as well, and so it's more of like a nuanced thing. But I would say, we're obviously giving our opinion that we're kind of in agreement that like pour over coffees are our preferred way of doing it. But I think you can get incredible coffees with really any sort of brewer.
Yeah.
I really think the fundamentals is going, not to beat a dead horse, but a scale and a grinder. Really.
And water. We didn't even talk about that. You need to use filtered water. I don't know how we missed that. Because we really geek out about water. We literally do water tastings and then do water extraction experiments. Water. Always use a filtered water. Like I can get all into that, but I won't. Just use a filtered water. If it says the TDS of the water, the total dissolved solids, which will be like mineral content of the water that it picks up from seeping through the ground and stuff like that. You want a water that's around 100 to 200 parts per million of total dissolved solids.
Cool, yeah.
So anyways, we kind of like get into that because coffee molecules, basically sugar and acid bond to magnesium and to calcium carbonate better than others. So it kind of matters what makes up that TDS, but to keep it simple, just get a filtered water. Not distilled.
Yeah. It'd be tough to boil and stuff. Do we have any more questions in the chat? We can wait like a minute or two. I don't see any more coming in right now. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming in. That was awesome as always. Guys, remember to support Lineage, support local businesses really during this time. Everyone could really use it. We've got a lot of great places in Orlando, including Lineage Coffee as a one-stop shop. I also I mentioned it to them right before this, but I really like their Lineage Academy Instagram page. They post a lot of really cool stuff. If you like the getting into really the nuances of the brewing process, the roasting process, their actuation, getting the actual coffee. Lineage Academy here, I'm going to post it in the Instagram here, is really good. They have a lot of really cool details on their whole process. Anything else you guys wanted to share before we head out?
No, I think that was it. Thank you so much for having us and watching.
Yeah, awesome. We're happy to have you. Thanks, Jacob, Jake, Jarrett. And yeah, thank everyone for watching. I hope you have a great day, and everyone stay safe out there. Have a good one.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to find out when we have new fun and informative videos for you. Orange County Library System is your place to learn, grow, connect.